Chapter 574, The Divine Army, 2. I really thought that I was going to die, Balzac said, his voice trembling as he arrived in front of Naren's walls. After straightening his disheveled robes, he politely placed his hands in front of him and bowed his head deeply. It has been a while. Sir Eugene, Lady Sienna, Lady Christina, have you all been well? Balzac politely inquired. But let alone the three he had just addressed, no one else was willing to respond to Balzac's greeting. Right now, all the members of the Divine Army's general staff had gathered at the foot of Naren's walls. Christina, who had been instructing the members of the Graceful Radiance and the other priests in the army, had quickly climbed up to the top of the walls after hearing the explosion and was now glaring at Balzac without any attempt to hide her hostility. Did you really come here just to say hello? Christina questioned suspiciously. Christina and Anise didn't harbor even the slightest favor toward Balzac. In the past, starting from when he first studied in Arath, Eugene had received various forms of help from Balzac. Sienna also respected Balzac as a fellow wizard. However, Christina and Anise didn't have anything like that. To the two saints, Balzac Ludbeth was just another black wizard who was contracted with the Demon King of Incarceration, the current staff of Incarceration, and the Demon King of Incarceration's emissary. And that was all that there was to him. There's no way that would be the case. After all, if I just wanted to say hello, I could have just as well done so from the walls of Babel, Balzac said with a laugh as he pointed up at the sky. High in the sky, the Demon King's castle Babel was blocking the view of the sun like it was a solar eclipse. The resulting huge shadow cast the ground below into an ominous twilight. The reason I came here personally. Balzac paused for a few moments as he looked at those gathered at the base of the walls. All those he had fought together with as allies during the liberation of Horia were gathered here. But among all of those who had followed Eugene at that moment, Balzac was the only one who hadn't joined the Divine Army. The reason I came here alone to the enemy camp, despite knowing that I would never be welcomed here, is that I would like to have a conversation, Balzac revealed. Balzac didn't appear to hesitate when saying the words enemy camp. At this declaration of his position in the war, Herodotus, the Blue Tower Master who had once studied alongside Balzac in the Blue Tower of Magic, let out a long sigh. Although it wasn't as bad as Herodotus, all of Aratha's Tower Masters couldn't help but feel deep emotions of betrayal and regret. The enemy camp, Lovelian, the Red Tower Master, spat out these words as his jaw trembled in anger. From the very start of their association in Arath, he had never liked Balzac. From the moment Balzac became a black wizard, the two Tower Masters had become completely incompatible like oil and water. However, regardless of his hatred and disgust for black wizards, Lovelian had always held an admiration and respect for Balzac's passion for magic. A conversation? Do you really like talking that much? So much so that you would even come here to the hated enemy camp to have a conversation, the White Tower Master Melkith screamed, unable to hold it in. It might be because she was aware of her surroundings. She had yet to cast her Omega Force, but she was radiating so much hostility that it seemed like she might attempt to kill Balzac at any moment. It was Sienna who calmed everyone down by ordering, "Stop." As soon as the word left her mouth, all the mana in the air stilled. In this world where all mana was frozen in place, the spell that Melkith had secretly been about to cast was unable to manifest itself. Startled, Melkith glanced up at Sienna. Melkith stammered, "Be big, sis goddess, there's no need for you to step forward personally. I'm going to slam this ungrateful bastard into the ground right now." He said that he's come here for a conversation, Sienna spoke over her without even turning to look at Melkith. Melkith couldn't help but feel very aggrieved by that reprimand. After all, it was Sienna who had taken the first shot at Balzac when he was flying down towards them from Babel. So why, at this point, would she be willing to agree to the conversation that Balzac had requested? Fine, Balzac Ludbeth. If you have really come here for a conversation, then we shall have a conversation. However, do you really believe that you are qualified to have a conversation with us? Sienna demanded. Despite blocking Melkith from taking action, Sienna had no intention of hiding her hostility. Balzac could feel the mana in the air constricting around him. All the mana within this area was under Sienna's complete control and followed her every order. Whilst shivering in excitement at this wondrous display of magic, Balzac bowed his head deeply and said, "As a lowly black wizard and a humble wizard, of course, I don't have the qualifications to have a conversation with you, Lady Sienna. Then there is also the fact that I have betrayed Lady Sienna's. Sienna interrupted him. Betrayed? That's the wrong word to use because there was never enough of a relationship between you and me to warrant the use of the word betrayal. Yes, it's just as you say, Lady Sienna, Balzac meekly agreed. You made sure to draw that line between us from the very start. However, Lady Sienna, isn't it a fact that my actions have disappointed you? Humph, that's true, Sienna said with a nod, unable to deny it. Balzac Ludbeth, I appreciated your dream. Although your secret desire was extremely blatant and ambitious, I also thought it was noble and respectable. The reason I thought so was that your dream was something that you could only pursue by remaining both a human and a wizard. Even if you did borrow the power of the Demon King of Incarceration to do so, I at least felt that your desire was pure. Crackle. A purple electric current began to flow around Sienna as she continued. However, if you were to abandon your identity as a human and as a wizard to pursue your dream as a black wizard, there is no way I would be able to tolerate you. That is why I am so disappointed. In the end, are you really going to give up the purity of your dream in order to serve the Demon King of Incarceration hand and foot? From the very beginning I was willing to make that compromise, Balzac admitted, his voice not shaking despite Sienna's cold reprimand. I was always aware of my limitations from the very start of my efforts. Because there is no way that I would be able to achieve my dream on my own. I, as you have already pointed out, Lady Sienna, made a contract with the Demon King of Incarceration. Since then I have continued to pursue my dream, but now. Balzac raised his bowed head. With a bitter smile, Balzac shook his head and said, Now I have decided to just accept it. Compared to the dream I so desperately desire, I am too feeble and weak. In the end I could never become like you, Lady Sienna. As such, I have decided to compromise. After all, it's not like I am fully giving up. Compromise. Sienna repeated the word with a frown. I won't be able to write a story like yours, Lady Sienna. I won't be able to become a legend like you have. In the end I am simply not like you. However, Balzac paused before bursting into laughter. Haha. Even if I can't become a legendary wizard, can't I at least become a legendary black wizard? A legendary black wizard. The crowd fell into a cold silence at this prideful declaration. Eugene, who had been keeping silent out of an understanding of Sienna's position as Balzac's senior and her disappointment towards him, felt his brow furrow in a frown. The general staff, who had just been showing their anger and hostility towards Balzac, were now distracted with keeping an eye out for Sienna's reaction. This was because Balzac's declaration wasn't just a direct refutation of Sienna's previous hopes for him. It could also be seen as an almost heretical insult to her personally. Sienna didn't show any obvious reaction and just stared piercingly at Balzac. Her green eyes, which were a shade that had always been reminiscent of emeralds, only grew stronger in their resemblance to those precious jewels as they now seemed completely devoid of any human emotions. Is that so? Sienna finally responded. Fwish. The electric current that had just been surging around Sienna suddenly disappeared. In that case, what exactly qualifies you to come here and request a conversation? Sienna asked with a smile. But her smile was only skin-deep as there wasn't any trace of amusement in Sienna's voice or in her eyes. Without avoiding her gaze, which was as hard and dry as flint, Balzac responded, I have come here to speak with you as the emissary of the Demon King of Incarceration and an envoy of Helmuth. It seems that I was mistaken. Sienna let out a snort as she took a step back. If you have come here in that capacity, then we have no reason not to converse with you. It also means that I don't have any reason to attack you. After all, you're not worth the effort. As someone who respects you so, Lady Sienna, those words are very hurtful, Balzac sighed. Although it feels disgusting to hear you say that you respect me, I won't tell you not to do so. However, I no longer have any respect for you. If you stand in my way when we reach Babel, I will be sure to sweep you aside without any respect or courtesy, Sienna promised. Babel. Eugene spoke up. Without hiding his annoyance, Eugene glared at Balzac and muttered darkly, Is there really any need to wait until Babel? I feel like we should just get rid of him now. Haha. I understand why you would say such a thing, but... Balzac pushed his glasses back up with an embarrassed smile. As I have said, I have come here as the emissary of the Demon King of Incarceration and an envoy of Helmuth. So naturally, all of my qualifications to do so were granted to me by the Demon King of Incarceration. If I am unable to return, then... Eugene shrugged. Well, who knows? I don't believe that the Demon King of Incarceration would be all that upset if we were to kill you right now. Actually, I also share the same thought, Balzac confessed. Even if I were to die, I don't believe the Demon King of Incarceration would feel even the slightest hint of rage. Eugene raised an eyebrow. So does that mean we're all right to kill you? If that is what you decided to do, Sir Eugene, there is nothing that I could do to avoid it. However, please allow me to have that conversation with you first, Balzac politely requested. Fine. If that is your last wish, there is no reason not to grant it, Eugene answered agreeably. Balzac's expression grew even more resigned at the words, last wish. He nodded slightly, then pointed to another section of the cast walls. I don't believe that you would be willing to offer me something like a seat, so how about this? Why don't we take a bit of a walk while we talk? Balzac proposed. All right. I should at least hear out your final request. Eugene nodded his head cooperatively once more. If that were even possible, Balzac's expression seemed to grow even more resigned upon hearing the words, final request. After letting out a slight cough, Balzac turned around and began walking down the length of the castle walls. Sir Eugene, Christina called out in concern. I'll be fine on my own, Eugene said, lightly waving Christina and the other members of the general staff off when they tried to follow him. But before he started walking off after Balzac, Eugene shot Sienna a glance. Just do as you please, Sienna said in reply to his glance, her voice still as cold as ice. Anger, frustration, and disappointment, these emotions were so evident in her voice that it was hard not to notice them. After hearing her reply, Eugene began following Balzac. The two continued walking like this for some time. Balzac's pace was quite fast, so in just a short time, they had already walked quite a distance from the others. So much so that when Eugene glanced over his shoulder, the figures of the general staff had grown very small. Of course, this distance didn't pose any problems for him. With the skills of the general staff, they would still be able to reach him in a mere instant. Just how much further do you plan on walking? Are you really going to keep walking until the others are no longer even visible? Eugene grumbled as he looked at the back of Balzac's head. In fact, there wasn't even any need to keep the members of the general staff in sight. From the very beginning until now, Balzac had always been firmly within Eugene's range. No matter what trick Balzac might pull, Eugene had the confidence that he would be able to kill Balzac in mere moments. This was only natural. There was too much of a difference in skills and levels between Eugene and Balzac. But that just left Eugene feeling even more confused. After all, Balzac should also be well aware of Eugene's strength. So why had he felt the need to attach himself to the Demon King of Incarceration? Given the nature of the Demon King of Incarceration, if Balzac simply refused to participate in the war, incarceration would never have forced him to do so. So why had Balzac still felt the need to enter Babel? Did he think that the Demon King of Incarceration would protect him? There was no way that would be the case. The Demon King of Incarceration would never descend from his palace. In that case, Balzac would simply be forced to serve as Babel's gatekeeper, destined to die while trying to block the hero from advancing. Still walking ahead of Eugene, Balzac finally spoke, Sir Eugene. At the same time, he slowed his pace until Eugene had reached his side. So just what exactly does this bastard have to say? Eugene thought to himself as he kept a calm expression on his face. Please spare my life, Balzac pleaded. What? Eugene's jaw twitched in surprise at this sudden request. He hadn't misheard Balzac. Eugene responded like this because he had clearly heard what Balzac had just said. Eugene turned to look at Balzac in disbelief before asking once more, What did you just say? I asked you to spare me. As he said this, Balzac's expression couldn't have been more serious. He looked directly at Eugene as he continued speaking. Please don't kill me right here and now and allow me to return with my life. Why should I? Eugene eventually asked. Balzac's expression was serious and his voice didn't have the slightest tremor. But that just left Eugene even more confused. With a hollow laugh, Balzac continued speaking. Sir Eugene, if you were to grant me that small mercy, it would be easier for me to return alive. Because Lady Sienna has no intention of killing me here today. Eugene shook his head as he said, That might be Sienna's intention, but it isn't mine. Also, all of the other members of the general staff do want to kill you today, right here and now. That's right, why don't we leave it up to a vote? If we were to allow the majority vote to decide your fate, I'm sure that they would probably unanimously agree on your execution. That would only be natural, Balzac agreed. If you know that, why would you come here? Just what kind of conversation have you come here to have? Eugene questioned. Balzac informed him. The reason I had no choice but to come here is, as I have already said, the demon king of incarceration has entrusted me with the duty of an envoy. I have come here in order to relay the intentions of the demon king of incarceration. Eugene raised an eyebrow. And what exactly are his intentions? He wishes to know when the war should begin, Balzac responded without any further prevarication. Eugene shook his head with a short laugh. Creak. The surge of emotion that those words naturally evoked caused Eugene to squeeze his fist tighter and tighter until veins popped up on the back of his hand. Eugene kept his voice calm. The official start of the war, huh? That's right, because right now we're still just in a standoff. Does that mean the demon king of incarceration has no intention of striking the first blow? Well, in the first place, isn't there still the promise that the demon king of incarceration made with you, Sir Eugene? Until you begin your climb up Babel, the demon king of incarceration has no intention of starting the war. Balzac paused for a few moments to look up at Babel. However, the moment you reach the castle, Sir Eugene, the war will surely break out. Once that happens, all of the forces currently gathered in Pandemonium will invade the continent once more. That seems likely, Eugene nodded his head. For now, that force only comprises a portion of Helmuth's demon folk, but the more time passes, the more Helmuth's public opinion will be forced to change, Balzac warned him. As the scent of blood spreads further and further, the demon folk who have refused to join the war will instinctively be drawn towards it. The giants who have been in hiding since Kamash's death may also end up joining the war. I am well acquainted with the skills of your divine army's general staff, but in terms of the quality of the general soldiery, the demon folk possess an overwhelming superiority. That might be true, Eugene conceded with a shrug. There was nothing that could be done about the fundamental difference between demon folk and humans. Of course, Balzac's warning would only be relevant if the war lasted for much longer. However, Eugene had no intention of prolonging this war. The war would end in a day or two at the very most. Sir Eugene, Balzac said with a sigh, I think it would be better to minimize the sacrifices on both sides. Balzac raised his hand and pointed at the walls of Pandemonium. When Lady Sienna attacked me earlier, Pandemonium's response wasn't intended on my part. Of course, it wasn't the intention of the demon king of incarceration either. The soldiers on those walls fired off that shot to protect me. Did you happen to see the power of that missile for yourself, Sir Eugene? Balzac asked curiously. The missile? Eugene repeated. Yes. Although they've attached many different titles in front of it, that thing is ultimately called a missile, Balzac explained. While recalling that one of the most basic magic attack spells was called Magic Missile, Eugene looked around at all the missiles installed on top of Pandemonium's city walls. Those missiles won't be used on the Divine Army following the start of the war. It's because they're too powerful for that. However, Sir Eugene, Balzac paused for a few moments. The moment that you lose your duel with the Demon King of Incarceration, all of Pandemonium's missiles will be launched toward all the countries on the continent. What? Eugene gasped in surprise. Balzac repeated himself. The moment that you are defeated, Sir Eugene, all of those missiles will set the continent ablaze. Their very first targets will be the capital cities, which can be described as the hearts of their respective countries. Then each sequential launch will target the city with the largest remaining population. Distance won't be a problem. Every inch of land in this world is within their range. Eugene was silent. Killing all of the humans living on the continent with just that alone would still be impossible. But their goal isn't to exterminate humanity. There will be immense destruction, but humanity will still survive. From then on, the surviving members of humanity will have to make a choice. Whether they should surrender to Helmuth or whether they should listen to their hatred and desire for revenge and continue fighting until they die, Balzac said, letting out a short sigh as he shook his head. That would be far too cruel. I have no desire for that to happen. But if the Divine Army were to surrender, the continent wouldn't have to become a sea of flames. Also, Helmuth will willingly accept all those who do surrender. Eugene finally spoke. Just what are you trying to say? I am merely persuading you to surrender, Balzac said calmly. Eugene blinked in surprise at this response. In the end, he burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Surrender, of all things it could have been. Naturally, this must be Balzac's personal suggestion, and it had nothing to do with the Demon King of Incarceration. Because the Demon King of Incarceration didn't have any reason to want them to surrender. That was why Eugene couldn't help but start laughing, and he kept laughing for quite some time. Just go. Eugene, who had finally finished laughing, lifted his hand. Balzac flinched at this movement and took a step back. However, Eugene's hand didn't move to attack Balzac. Instead, Eugene pointed at Babel as it floated high in the sky and continued speaking while still chuckling. I won't kill you, so just go. Go back to Babel or run away someplace else. Sir Eugene, Balzac tried to protest. That's right, I'm allowing you to live because it seems that you're trying to limit the destruction in your own way. Even if it is with such a foolish method as you coming down here, fully prepared to die, in order to try and persuade me to surrender. Eugene shook his head in disbelief. It was Balzac's turn for silence. As such, I will allow you to leave with your life. Though to be clear, it's just this one time, Eugene warned him. While he might be able to kill Balzac, Eugene had decided not to. Instead, he would allow Balzac to leave with his life. This would be the only time he did so. Even if he allowed Balzac to escape with his life this time, if they were to meet in Babel, then at that time Sienna would be sure to kill Balzac before Eugene could even make a move. On what grounds? Balzac asked once more. Given your personality, I never expected you to surrender, Sir Eugene, but even so, isn't this something that you should discuss with the others? It's meaningless, Eugene replied with a snicker. Surrendering won't change anything. It doesn't matter whether or not the Demon King of Incarceration shoots those missiles of his. If I cannot overcome the Demon King of Incarceration, then everything will truly be over. Balzac silently pondered this. Ah, that's right. You were asking about when we should declare the start of the war. All right, let's make it a month later, Eugene said before turning to leave. Eugene, who had laughed for quite some time, said something that Balzac couldn't understand, and had declared the day on which to start the war without giving it much thought. Balzac stared at Eugene's back in confusion. However, Eugene didn't have anything more to say as he leisurely began walking back the way they had come. All right, Balzac finally said. He couldn't understand Eugene's rejection of his offer. However, Balzac was able to infer something from Eugene's response. Those monsters that Balzac had devoured in Horia using gluttony, their ominous dark power, the Demon King of Destruction, and the oath that the Great Vermouth had sworn with the inscrutable Demon King of Incarceration. 1 month later, I will see you in Babel, Balzac called out. It wasn't that Eugene wasn't willing to surrender. It was that he couldn't surrender. If Eugene didn't manage to overcome the Demon King of Incarceration, the world would be destroyed. Having understood this, Balzac bowed his head low. A bright smile appeared on his shadowed face. Chapter 575. The Divine Army 3. Why did you allow him to return? 1 month. The questions came flying at Eugene at the same time. Which one was he meant to answer first? Eugene was left momentarily speechless as he could only blink his eyes in confusion. I asked you why you allowed him to return. 1 month. That's far too soon. While he was still blinking his eyes, the barrage of words continued. Although the other members of the general staff didn't join in the questioning, all of their faces were covered in doubt and uncertainty. For now, you both should try to calm down, Eugene said, raising his hands as he tried to get them to step back. Because if they didn't, Sienna and Anise seemed like they were about to take turns hitting him as they drew closer. I'll answer your questions one by one. So Sienna, for now, please let your mana settle down. Also, Christina, you should also lower your flail as well. All right. Eugene nervously pleaded. It was Anise, not Christina, who was glaring at him through narrowed eyes, but apart from Seal, none of the other members of the general staff were aware of Anise's existence. As such, Eugene was left with no choice but to use Christina's name instead. Fine then, Anise huffed. Although she didn't retract her narrow-eyed glare for now, Anise decided to lower her flail. Sienna also allowed her mana to settle down with a pout. Once that was done, Eugene was able to let out a deep sigh of relief as he took his seat. I allowed him to return because I felt like it wouldn't matter even if I let him go, Eugene explained. And I feel like you deserve a smack, huh? Sir Eugene, would you mind if I gave you one? Anise asked as her hand went back to the flail that she had just set down. Eugene's shoulders trembled as he flinched and quickly insisted, No, really. I just thought that it would be okay to send him back, so that's what I did. And now I'm asking you why you would make such a foolish decision, Anise said coldly. Because Balzac is still holding on to his humanity in his own way, Eugene tried to argue. He couldn't do anything about the fact that he had already bound himself to the demon king of incarceration through his contract, so it seems that he took up the position as the new staff of incarceration to minimize the destruction from the war. Or so I believe. So what, are you saying that we shouldn't kill Balzac Ludbeth? Anise asked doubtfully. No, Eugene responded while shaking his head. This is the last time I will show him mercy or give him a chance to escape. I gave you an explanation for why I made such a decision, but if Balzac does block our way up through Babel, then I'll be the one to kill him, Sienna spat out before Eugene could finish speaking. Today I was planning to allow him to return to Babel with his life in any case. It doesn't matter whether or not Balzac retains his human emotions. Now that he has become the staff of incarceration, so long as he stays in Babel and protects the demon king of incarceration, if he has truly given up his dream as a wizard to devote himself to his duty as the staff of incarceration, then as the guardian of magic, once we climb up through that damn Babel, I will be sure to take his life. Although her mana had settled down, her voice was still fierce. The other archwizards who were part of the general staff looked at Sienna with admiring eyes upon hearing this declaration. Setting aside the overflowing murderous intent that was seeping out of Sienna, it seemed that they had been entranced by her title, the Guardian of Magic. Big sis, let me go with you. I also want to climb up through Babel, until we reach the demon king of incarceration. Then I'll show him the power of the strongest spirit summoner of all time. Melkith said as she clenched her fists excitedly. Her motivation was impressive, but there was no way that they could allow this. Eugene rejected her, Sienna, Christina, and I will be the only ones ascending Babel. But why? Melkith complained. That is because, Lady Melkith, while I acknowledge you as the greatest spirit summoner of all time, you won't be able to use your amazing spirit summoning skills freely while within Babel, Eugene explained. Babel was the location in which the demon king of incarceration could most powerfully exercise his full strength. While Eugene of course hadn't managed the climb up to the demon king's palace 300 years ago, he had heard from Sienna, Anise and Molin about what the battle had been like back then. At that time, Sienna had had most of her magic sealed off during their battle against the demon king of incarceration, and Tempest had barely managed to remain active throughout the fight. You should take care of things on the surface, Lady Melkith. And if possible, please clear the walls of Pandemonium, Eugene requested. The walls? Melkith repeated quizzically. Eugene answered her question by explaining the purpose of the missiles that had been installed on top of the walls. After hearing that they were aimed at all of the countries on the continent, the general staff's expressions were filled with shock. We need to evacuate immediately. Honian stammered as he leaped up from his seat. Among the general staff of the Divine Army, Honian and Amon were the only members of royalty who would be directly participating in the battle. Although he didn't show any reaction to the news, Amon's expression was also extremely dark. Is there any meaning to doing that? According to Eugene, those missiles are able to bombard the entire continent, Ivatar pointed out. Amon sighed deeply and shook his head in response to Ivatar's words. Even so, we can't just leave our citizens to burn in our cities. If you really must evacuate, then send them to Salmar, Ivatar offered. The land of the rainforest is vast and aside from the Lionheart's estate, it is the place with the highest concentration of mana on the continent. You can use the rainforest as your main refugee camp if the archwizards here are willing to step in and erect a defensive barrier to protect them. Everyone turned to look at Ivatar as if they were surprised to hear him give such a good idea. Ivatar realized the meaning of the gazes being directed at him, and he furrowed his brow in a frown as he responded. Those gazes feel extremely insulting. Just because we are the native tribespeople of the forest doesn't mean that we are barbaric and ignorant. Honian coughed. Ahem, we weren't going quite that far with our thoughts. Ivatar shrugged. In any case, if you feel the need to evacuate, then come down to the rainforest. However, when you issue the evacuation order, it would be best not to mention the possible bombing. Doing so would only needlessly increase their anxiety and confusion. Eugene clapped his hands in approval at this insightful remark, which made it hard to believe that it came from an indigenous tribesman. Ivatar raised an eyebrow. What exactly do you mean by your applause? Eugene shrugged. It just means, oh, you really are smart, aren't you, Ivatar? In the face of this compliment made with seemingly pure intentions, Ivatar could only furrow his brow even further because he wasn't sure what kind of reaction he should show. He was a hot-blooded man who would usually never allow any insult to go unanswered. But that being said, Ivatar couldn't permit himself to take out his fiery personality against Eugene. What do you mean you want me to clear the wall? What kind of boring request are you trying to make of me, Malkuth al-Haya, the greatest and most powerful spirit summoner of all time? Malkuth, who had finally realized the seriousness and gravity of the matter, began to grumble. Eugene took a deep breath. Lady Malkuth's amazing and powerful infinity force. That name was for when there were only 3 spirit kings. Now it's called Omega Force, Malkuth insisted. Right. I'm asking you to please destroy all of the missiles on the wall with your Omega Force. Then if you get the chance you can charge into Pandemonium and sweep them all away as well, Eugene said encouragingly. Are you asking me, Lady Malkuth, to charge straight into the enemy base and run wild? Malkuth demanded, her voice rising. Eugene raised a brow. What, are you afraid? No, it's just that I'm so happy. Malkuth said as she excitedly clenched her fists. Malkuth, who loved being in the spotlight and held an overflowing desire for validation, couldn't help but be excited by the critical nature of the mission she had just been given. The rainforest might be huge, but it will be impossible for it to accommodate all of the refugees on the continent. We will also need to construct shelters in each country, Anise assessed. Eugene waved it off. The kings will take care of that on their own. Sienna sniffed. How nice for you. You just casually need to tell them to do something, and others will take care of all the hard work for you. Who were the ones who looked at me and told me to sit in this seat as the commander-in-chief of the army? You gave me this seat so that I can focus on slaying the demon kings, so all that I need to do is concentrate on doing my job, Eugene said smugly. Sienna glared at him in response, but Eugene didn't feel any guilt. Everyone had their strengths and capabilities. Administration was definitely something that Eugene wasn't good at, nor was it something that he would ever willingly do. I'm also not good at making barriers, so you should take the other archwizards with you, Sienna, and take care of it by yourselves, Eugene instructed. You are also an archwizard, Sienna pointed out. Eugene shrugged as he said, lately I've actually been wondering if I can even be considered a wizard. What about me even looks like a wizard? Am I a wizard just because I have a signature spell? But I don't use any magic apart from that. As he was in the middle of saying all this with a calm expression, Eugene suddenly flinched and turned to look at Lovelian's expression. This was because Eugene felt that, no matter what, it might be going too far to deny the usefulness of his magic in front of Lovelian, the one who had taught him magic. Well, each person has their own style that best suits them, Lovelian reassured Eugene. It's just that your fighting style doesn't match that of a pure wizard, Sir Eugene. Eugene winced. That's... Even so, I do always make use of my signature, don't I? In fact, there's not much difference between what I do when swinging my sword and casting a spell. It's just what I'm trying to say is that I'm not good when it comes to barriers. That's all that I meant to imply. As Eugene earnestly backtracked on his words and made amends, Lovelian's disappointed expression softened slightly. But what about Sir Molin? Don't I need to summon him? Seal tilted her head to the side and asked. In addition to mastering the white flame formula, Seal had also been baptized by Eugene, so the current Seal was now able to reach even the northernmost point of the continent when using her demon eye of darkness. Eugene nodded in assent as he said, of course you need to summon him. I'll send him a message after I first enter Babel so you can summon him then. In the showdown against the Demon King of Incarceration, Eugene couldn't afford to hold back any cards. Fighting the Demon King on his own was also out of the question. Molin had been transformed into an incarnation of Eugene and was his greatest warrior. He was a powerful fighting force that definitely couldn't be left out of action. Isn't 1 month a bit too short? Sienna asked as she furrowed her brow. Of course, I'm aware that we don't have much time left. However, we should still have the freedom to wait longer than a month, don't we? Eugene shook his head. Even if we increase the delay until the start of the war to more than a month, nothing will change. Instead, the longer it takes, the more anxious people will become. I'm more afraid of that than anything else. 1 month, Carmen suddenly spoke up. She tilted her head to the side and stared at Eugene. Oh, Radiant Lion. Do we really have enough? No, I already know full well that the world doesn't have that much time left. After all, I did accompany you on your visit to the rainforest. That was when they met the sage Fisher Laviola. Carmen was also present at that meeting. She hadn't listened in on the full conversation, but she was aware that the previous era had met its destruction before they had arrived at the current era. However, apart from me, no one else among the general staff is aware of that fact. Even I don't know the complete truth. But now I feel that we deserve to know the truth, Carmen said firmly. Eugene grunted consideringly. We are also a part of this world. We have come here today to protect the world and defeat the Demon King of Incarceration, Carmen said, her eyes revealing her strong determination. The other members of the general staff also looked at Eugene with the same determination. Indeed, this really isn't something I should hide any longer, Eugene finally agreed with a deep sigh. The members of the Lionheart clan already knew that Vermouth was sealing the Demon King of Destruction. However, he had never told them about the true meaning of their war against the Demon King of Incarceration and what would happen following the end of the oath. Eugene had already decided that this was something he should tell them someday. It couldn't be kept hidden forever. If I lose to the Demon King of Incarceration, the world will be destroyed, Eugene said with a calm expression. Even if I win, that doesn't mean that the world won't end. If I lose, the Demon King of Incarceration will take action to destroy the world, and even if I win, the Demon King of Destruction, as his name suggests, will also attempt to destroy the world. The crowd was silent. There was nothing that they could say in response to that. There wasn't even a hint of emotion in the tone that Eugene had used to relay these alarming facts. He was talking as if he were describing a process that was completely natural and inevitable. Next, Eugene told them about how destruction would surely come looking to end them within a few months' time. He told them about how previous versions of this world had been destroyed multiple times. He also revealed that he was the reincarnation of Agaroth, the god of war who had been alive during the time of the ancient age of myth. He explained how the world should have already been destroyed 300 years ago but had been given a reprieve thanks to the oath that Vermouth had made with the Demon King of Incarceration. Eugene honestly admitted, I don't know why the Demon King of Incarceration wants to turn the world into a sea of flames the moment he defeats me. I can't tell what that son of a bitch's true intentions are. However, if I was forced to pick which side he is on, I suspect he's on the side that opposes the Demon King of Destruction. While that might be the case, it seemed that the Demon King of Incarceration had no intention of directly confronting the Demon King of Destruction. Eugene suspected that he simply wasn't capable of contending with destruction. The Demon King of Incarceration had been forced to witness the destruction of the world many times over, crossing over to the next world each time that it happened. Eugene thought that the reason the Demon King of Incarceration refused to face the Demon King of Destruction was the possibility of Incarceration dying if he did so. But so what if he did die? The Demon King of Incarceration's only desire seemed to be preventing the destruction of the world. If he had lived for so long while futilely clinging to that one desire, then what exactly was keeping the Demon King of Incarceration alive? What kept the Demon King of Incarceration hoping that the world wouldn't be destroyed, and that the Demon King of Destruction would be erased? I don't consider the Demon King of Incarceration to be an ally. Whether it is in the past or the present, that person is and always will be a Demon King, and he was the one who first launched the invasion against the rest of the world. He has also done the same thing this time as well. I don't know what kind of reason or stubborn insistence he has for doing such a thing, but 1 month later, I will climb up through Babel and cut the Demon King of Incarceration down in his own damn palace. After that, I will slay the Demon King of Destruction as well, Eugene promised before shaking his head with a short sigh. That's why I said that the war would start in a month. It won't end with just slaying the Demon King of Incarceration, and the longer this standoff goes on, the more the people's faith in me will waver. In order to save the world, Carmen spoke, her voice trembling slightly, and prevent the destruction. With a shaking hand, Carmen reached inside of her vest and pulled out a cigar case. Despite her hand tremors growing increasingly intense, she managed to open the case and grab a cigar, but in the end, the cigar that she had stuck between her fingers snapped under the vibration. How amazing, Carmen muttered as she tightly clutched the broken cigar. Carmen suddenly leaped up from her seat and swung her jacket over her shoulders. Let's go, Carmen said as she looked around to the rest of the general staff. Everyone else, who still seemed weighed down by the truth of the matter, turned to look at Carmen with puzzled expressions. Seal stammered, "Jigo, where? The time given to us is short, but there is much that we need to do," Carmen said firmly. "To save the world. To prevent its destruction. And finally to save the ancestor of the Lionheart clan, the Great Vermouth." The broken cigar that Carmen was still holding in her hand was burnt into ashes and disappeared. "Now isn't the time for us to remain here, being crushed by the weight of the truth or cowering in fear. We must become the cornerstone of the brilliant future that the Radiant Lion has drawn for us. We are the vanguard. Of war, of light, of glory, and of victory." Carmen roared as she raised her clenched fist in front of the other members of the general staff. "In order to be victorious, our flames must burn brightly on the battlefield. Just how long are you all going to keep sitting there?" "Alcester." "Why yes." Alcester stuttered. "Draw your sword and come with me," Carmen ordered. "It's time for a spar. Then next, Lord Ortis, it will be your turn." Ortis was bewildered. "Why are you suddenly challenging us to a spar?" "That is a foolish question, Lord Ortis. For knights like us, apart from sparring, is there a need for any other type of training?" Carmen said as she spun around. As she left the conference room ahead of everyone else, Alcester and Ortis, who had been directly named by her, also got up to leave. Just like that, the general staff left the conference room one by one. It might be because they had all felt something stir within them during Carmen's magnificent speech, but each of them walked with purpose. To save the world. To prevent destruction. They may have already firmed up their resolve, knowing that they must be victorious, but the stakes that had just been revealed had only caused their resolve to grow all the more desperate. There was only a month left. Defeating the Demon King of Incarceration wouldn't be the end of the war. The world could only be saved if the Demon King of Destruction, who had already destroyed the world several times over, was defeated. Once they had all left, Eugene, Sienna, and the Saints were the only ones left in the conference room. "Wouldn't it have been better for Lady Carmen to have been the commander-in-chief rather than me?" Eugene said with a snort as he turned to look at the others. They found themselves enthusiastically agreeing with Eugene's words, but they just couldn't bring themselves to nod and admit it. "I also have to get going," Sienna said as she stood up. "Where to?" Eugene asked. "The great commander-in-chief of the Divine Army did ask me to set up the barriers, didn't he? That's why I'm going off to do just that." Sienna snapped. "Come back safely," Eugene said, not the slightest bit intimidated by her anger as he waved at Sienna in farewell. "I will also be leaving," Anise informed him. Eugene looked at her in surprise. "Why you as well? It's not like you're needed to set up a barrier. Please don't say something so stupid. The priests of this era are extremely inexperienced when it comes to battling demon folk. Do you know just how much of a hassle it is to teach them about such things?" Anise hissed as she glared at Eugene. "Then we also have to mass-produce holy water. Do you know just how annoying that is?" "Well, if you need help just tell me," Eugene offered. "After all, it's just a matter of me slitting my wrists a few times. Instead of that, why don't you chop off all of your limbs and go jump into a lake? A few days of that, and it might be enough to transform the entire lake into holy water." Eugene gulped. If that's what you need." Anise just snorted at his stammered response and stood up to leave. "No, let's just ignore that idea. Hamel, all that you should do during this month is conserve as much strength as possible. And think of a way to defeat the Demon King of Incarceration." All right," Eugene conceded. Anise frowned and said, "I'm asking this just in case, but the reason you only gave them a month is that you have the confidence to win, right?" Eugene hesitated. "That's something I'll only know once I've attempted it." Anise's face twisted into a scowl after hearing his uncertain answer. She barely managed to hold back the harsh words she'd been about to blurt out as she glared at Eugene. "Please don't say such a thing in front of the general staff or the Divine Army," Anise said through gritted teeth. "Of course I wouldn't do that," Eugene scoffed. "I know as well as you do how important morale is on the battlefield." Anise just let out a deep sigh at his thick-skinned response. "Sometimes I truly despair at the fact that the fate of the world is in your hands." "You don't mean that," Eugene laughed. "After all, you trust me, don't you? It would be a whole lot better if you could just keep your mouth shut." Anise let out another deep sigh as she left the conference room with one last look at Eugene's grinning face. After she had left, the smile disappeared from Eugene's face. Without any trace of amusement on his face, he got out of his seat and walked over to the window. 1 month, huh? Eugene muttered to himself. Looking through the window, he glared up at Babel. The confidence to win? Anything like that had always felt extremely faint, starting from his duel with Gavid. Eugene had never had the confidence that he would absolutely, definitely, without fail, be able to win. He had fought because he had to. This time would be the same. He needed to win. He had to win. If he didn't win, everything would end. And he didn't want that. I need to win, Eugene muttered to himself as he glared up at Babel. 1 month passed. Chapter 576. The War Begins 1. Oh Lord. It was a devout call. Eugene opened his eyes. He had fallen into deep sleep while being aware of his surroundings. It was to bring his body and mind to an optimal state. Thanks to that, even though he had just awoken, his eyelids were not heavy and his mind was crystal clear. In fact, Eugene felt sharper than ever, both mentally and physically, though he had just woken up. My Lord. A soft whisper. Eugene turned his head towards the gentle call coming from right beside him. That call made Eugene think of the distant past. Are you doing that on purpose? He questioned. Christina tilted her head in confusion at the sudden question. Eugene himself thought it was a foolish question to ask. Christina and Anise did not know about his memory as Ogoroth. Eugene rubbed his head in an attempt to erase the faint remnants of it. I'm wondering why you're calling me like that all of a sudden, he corrected himself. Because today of all days Sir Eugene must be a god, Christina replied with a faint smile. He needed to be a god today more than ever. Eugene knew the meaning and weight behind her response and smirked bitterly. It's not just me who calls you that. Oh my God. Everyone in the divine army repeats it, continued Christina. I know, Eugene responded while placing a hand over his heart. Simply being aware of it made the voices audible. The voices had grown incessantly over the past month, leading to today. He could feel the prayers and faith of those from all over the continent as well as from his divine army. It couldn't be helped that the voices had grown stronger leading up to this day. The continent had been stirred over the month. Although an announcement was not made regarding the missiles and bombings, the very act of evacuation due to the war instilled fear in the citizens. The divine army in Naren felt the fear as well, knowing the onset of war was imminent. They sought their god to forget their fears. In this world their god was no longer far away. The very god who would listen to their prayers, confront the demon kings and bring them victory in the war was right here. Because they knew this, their prayers were unceasing. The preparations for war are complete, Christina whispered. She clutched the rosary around her neck as she bowed her head. Everyone is waiting for your command, Sir Eugene. I told you that I didn't want to do this, answered Eugene. On a day like today, please say you will do it willingly, my god, responded Christina. She raised her head again and Anise, who had taken her place, glared at Eugene and snapped. If not you, the commander-in-chief, then who else will declare the onset of war? If it's about qualifications, Sienna has plenty, and if it's about trust, Lady Carmen also. Please, Lord. You know how important today is, don't you? Shouted Anise. Her expression was fierce as she berated Eugene. Yes, Eugene chuckled and rose from the bed. The sudden change in the atmosphere made Anise's shoulders twitch. Stepping down from the bed, Eugene placed a hand on Anise's shoulder and said, Today is an important day. Could be the end of this era. Or it might be the turning point that changes the end. By God, said Anise. Let's not be too solemn though, declared Eugene. Anise's eyes fluttered angrily at his response. Are you acting foolish just to ease my tension? She questioned. I did mean to ease the tension, but I'm not joking when I say I don't want to do it, answered Eugene. You really are. Anise started. I am indeed your god and you are indeed my saint. It's true that today is important and special. But let's not make too much of a fuss about it. As Eugene spoke, he stretched out his hand and a large jar nearby gently floated into the air. Anise blinked several times. She did not understand Eugene's intent. Step back, he commanded. Excuse me? Anise questioned. Step back. It might splash, he explained. What could possibly splash? Anise did not understand, but she stepped back as Eugene had instructed. Meanwhile, the floating jar moved forward toward Eugene. He quickly reached out and grabbed the jar. Instantly, the empty jar was filled with water. "What are you doing?" Before Anise could finish her sentence, Eugene lifted the jar above his head. Fush! The cold water poured down. "What on earth? What are you doing?" Anise gasped in shock. Eugene shook his damp hair a few times, then reached for the cloak of darkness from a nearby coat hanger. Swish! The cloak flew towards him and wrapped around his body. "A cold shower," Eugene said. "Excuse me?" Anise asked. "Just wanted to freshen up the mind as well," he declared. His previously drenched hair dried instantly and became fluffy. Eugene slapped his cheeks with both hands and then walked past Anise. "Let's go," he said. Anise blinked as she followed Eugene, who headed towards the door. Soon she burst into laughter and nodded. "Yes, Hamel. It sounds much better than being exalted as a god," Eugene said. "Really, if you wanted to relieve the tension for Christina and me, there were plenty of other ways you could have done it," Anise hinted. "I just woke up. I did it to wash up." Eugene chuckled casually and opened the door. His officers were lined up in the long corridor, excluding Sienna and the archwizards, knights and warriors unrelated to magic. Eugene saw Carmen, Gilead, and Guillaume standing closest to the door. "Did everyone sleep well?" Eugene asked with a grin. "I tried my best to get some sleep," Gilead replied with a wry smile. Many had lost their sleep as this day drew nearer due to a mix of nerves and excitement. This was true for most of the Divine Army, and the members of the General Staff were no exception. It was unavoidable. Their adversary was the Demon King of Incarceration, who had reigned over countless eras for an immeasurable span of time. Considering the eras he had crossed over, the time the Demon King of Incarceration had ruled could very well be discussed as eternal. "You seem to have slept well," Eugene commented. "I tried my best to sleep." Guillaume's teasing reply drew a snicker from Eugene. However, the other officers couldn't manage to smile. The war would begin today. Eugene, Sienna, and Christina would ascend to Babel, and the Divine Army would block Helmuth's offensive on the ground. Frankly speaking, the battle on the ground was not the source of fear. Many had already faced demons and demonic creatures in Horia. Carmen, Ordis, and Ivik had even experienced despair in a battle against a demon king. No matter how fierce the battle on the ground might be, it would not be vastly different from the ones they had already endured. The real issue was Babel. If Eugene's group, having entered Babel, were defeated by the Demon King of Incarceration, regardless of the outcome on the ground, everything would end. There was nothing the officers could do about that. Thus, their expressions were inevitably grim. Eugene was strong, but the opponent was the Demon King of Incarceration. The members of the General Staff could not possibly imagine the defeat of the great Demon King. "You lack faith," Eugene commented. He could feel the pervasive anxiety. As he walked among the members of the General Staff, he placed a hand over his heart. Whoosh! Divine fire surged near his heart, instantly transforming the atmosphere in the corridor. The air, previously frozen with anxiety and tension, became permeated by flames. "Ah!" Ivatar exclaimed without realizing it. He turned his head and saw Eugene's back. Eugene's presence felt like a beacon in the dark night sea as he passed the members of the General Staff. The anxiety and tension in their hearts dissolved at the mere sight of his back. But that wasn't all either. Ivatar felt something else from Eugene's back. It felt as if Eugene had become someone else. Strangely enough, Ivatar accepted this sensation as familiar and natural. "Haha." Alchester let out a low chuckle while clenching his fist. The sweat that had pooled in his hand was now dry. Lack of faith, huh? It was true. One must not think of Eugene's defeat. One must not doubt his victory. Alchester swallowed his laughter and looked at Eugene's back. This was a sight he couldn't have imagined when he first saw Eugene years ago. "Brilliant," Carmen murmured with a smirk. Among the members of the General Staff there, only Carmen was calm. She felt neither tension, anxiety, nor fear. She had unwavering faith in Eugene's victory and was confident that her dragon claw would contribute to a brilliant future beyond incarceration and destruction. "Is it lacking?" Eugene glanced back as he asked, but no one answered. All the members of the General Staff in the corridor already stood behind him with unshaken faces. "I shouldn't have asked," said Eugene. He smirked and continued walking forward. The door at the end of the corridor opened on its own. This building stood atop the walls of Naren. Eugene stepped out the door and immediately found himself walking along the wall. The sky was overcast. Clouds so thick it seemed they might burst into rain at any moment obscured the sun, giving the sky a grim, murky appearance. But it wouldn't rain. Eugene glanced up briefly. Those weren't ordinary clouds. Rather, the dark power of the Demon King of Incarceration had covered up the nearby skies. The weather's shitty today, Eugene muttered to himself. He lowered his gaze and stopped to turn around. Oh! The moment he looked down, a thunderous cheer erupted. Although this place had yet to become a battlefield, the sounds of the onset of war were imminent and close. Below the high walls was the Divine Army, the strongest troops gathered from across the continent. They were positioned on the plains between the continent and Pandemonium. The soldiers roared upon seeing Eugene. "Took your sweet time, didn't you?" Sienna's voice rang out clearly even amid the deafening cheers from the plains. She suddenly appeared at his side and gently elbowed him in the ribs. "It was you who told me to sleep off my worries," Eugene said. "I didn't expect you to sleep in this late," Sienna retorted. "It's still just noon. It's not that late. So, how are things?" Eugene asked, taking in the archwizards assembling beside Sienna. "We've done all we can prepare," Sienna answered. The magical corps had been the most occupied over the past month, with Sienna and the archwizards at the forefront. They connected the Samar forest to the World Tree, establishing a powerful defensive barrier, and erected similar barriers over each kingdom's major cities. Simultaneously, they had set up various magics in these planes to prepare for the battle and mass-produced magical scrolls to support the Divine Army. Christina and Anise, along with the priests, had also participated in the mass production of holy water and divine magic, but their efforts paled in comparison to Sienna and the wizards. "I also visited Lahanjar in the middle of the night," Sienna added. Summoning Molan would leave Lahanjar empty. As such, Sienna needed to use her magic to artificially prevent the emergence of the Nur. Thanks to that, Sienna had been in Lahanjar until just earlier. "What about Pandemonium?" questioned Eugene. "It's empty. Doesn't look like there's a second wave. It's impossible for them to strike us from the rear," answered Sienna. "Huh," Eugene chuckled dryly as he looked forward. Pandemonium was out of sight. The end of the plains was not visible either. Beyond the Divine Army lay a vast army made up of demons and demonic creatures. It seemed as if all the demonic creatures bred in Helmuth had gathered on this plain. It wasn't just demons either. He could see humans here and there, and though not many, there were giants and a few beast folk as well. "Are we just going to smash into each other with all our might?" Sienna asked. "The battle on the ground won't mean much to the Demon King of Incarceration," answered Eugene. Sienna stared darkly at the blackened skies of Babel. Even if the ground forces were annihilated, it would mean nothing to the Demon King of Incarceration. He was a great Demon King and he could sweep the continent alone if he wished. "But not me," continued Eugene. His left hand was still placed over his heart, and it emitted an increasingly fierce light. "If this is war, then I want victory." His left hand fell from his chest. Eugene raised his hand above his head, with all of the Divine Army watching him. Whoosh! The divine fire that had enveloped his left hand blazed fiercely. Eugene grinned and casually tossed the flames up into the sky. Whoosh! The flames soared high and swelled explosively. Amidst the magically darkened sky, a blood-red sun was forged. Just as Agaroth had done in the Age of Myth, Eugene crafted a miracle, conjuring a sun with his divine power. Ah! The Divine Army forgot to shout, entranced by the sun in the sky. Everyone knew this was not the real sun, though it appeared so. Yet for the troops on this battlefield, this artificial sun shone more brilliantly than the actual sun. They had roared to forget their fears and trepidations, but now, such roars were unnecessary as no trace of fear could be felt. Instead, feelings of faith and courage overflowed from their hearts. "Sanctuary!" Anise exclaimed in awe, turning to look at Eugene. Even during his battle with Noir, Eugene's sanctuary had not covered such an extensive area. But now, without even deploying prominence, Eugene had turned the entire plain into a sanctuary. Within this sanctuary, the faithful could fight tirelessly. Wounds would heal rapidly and divine power would enhance their mana. The mere presence of that sun drastically increased the power of the Divine Army several-fold. I'm not one for grand speeches, Eugene admitted as he caught the gaze of the entire divine army. He extended his hand. Whoosh! The Lionheart banner, previously affixed to the walls of Naren, flew into Eugene's hand. Recalling the march in Horia, Eugene grinned. Troops, he said. Creak creak. The ominous sound echoed from the flagstaff in his hand. Mana filled the staff and wrapped it in flames. Crack! From Eugene's hand the flagstaff shot forth, piercing through space and impaling the largest giant in the enemy's ranks. As it pierced, flames burst forth and caused the giant's body to explode. The surrounding demons and monsters were instantly reduced to ashes. Let's survive to see this through, he said with a smile. In the midst of the enemy camp, the Lionheart banner fluttered boldly,